Hello, this is Charlie Crimebuster, and on today's program, we're going to share with you 5 things you may not know about the disappearance of Kristin Smart. It's in the news today, and you're going to be very intrigued by this case right here on what some people have called the fastest 30 minutes in crime talk. Well, hello and welcome once again to Charlie Crimebuster. We're glad to have you with us. We have listeners all the way from the East Coast to the West Coast, and we're glad you're one of them. Hey, go to charliecrimebuster.com if you have not yet subscribed. Subscribe to the podcast. You'll see a lot of great information there to help you and yours to stay safer out there in this world in which we live in. Now, our podcast is off the cuff, so we don't do a lot of fancy stuff where we go back and correct mistakes, so you might perhaps hear me get tongue-tangled or tang-tangled sometimes, and I might mispronounce a word or so, but we go right on because we've got some great truth to share with you and some good tips on how to keep you and your loved ones safe. But today, we're going to tell you 5 things you may not know about the disappearance of Kristin Smart. And I guess one of the first things I need to say is you need to be careful that you don't mix up this story of Kristin Smart with Elizabeth Smart. You recall that she was the one that was taken from her home in 2002, and she was recovered about a year later. But this, you see, is Kristin Smart, and this case is in regards to May the 25th, 1996, on the campus of the California Poly State University, or as some commonly call, Cal Poly. You see, 3 fellow students there escorted Smart, this is Kristin Smart, back to her hall of residence after an off-campus party. Now, her death is called an active missing person case. And we're going to have a special hats off to Chris Lambert. You see, he is a fellow podcaster, and with his podcast entitled Your Own Backyard, well, that podcast took a deep dive on the case of Kristin Smart, and that case attracted a lot of people, and that podcast got a lot of folks on board. In fact, his podcast, it was downloaded more than 1 million times in just the first 4 months, more later. And that could be the reason why you and I are even talking today about that case. And there just may be, and we hope it is, there just may be justice ahead for the family of Kristin. We'll tell you more about that in the 5 things that you may not know. You see, Smart was enrolled at Cal Poly in St. Louis Obispo, California. And on the night she disappeared, she attended a birthday party for a fellow student, and that weekend fell on Memorial Day weekend. And around 2 a.m. in the morning, on May the 25th, she was found passed out, or at least laying down, on a neighbor's lawn by 2 fellow students. And the 2 fellow students were Cheryl Anderson and Tim Davis. Both Cheryl and Tim, they had just left the party, and they helped to get Smart to her feet, and they decided to assist her in getting back to her own dorm. And that is the time that the main suspect, or as politically, I guess I should say, as police refer to it, the quote-unquote person of interest, and the only person of interest, by the way, Paul Flores, joined their group. You see, he offered to help the 2 with what others have termed was a very intoxicated Kristin Smart. But as a sidebar, I should say that there are some who think that maybe Kristin was a victim of the date rape drug, and that she might have been slipped to her at her party, and she may have been not only intoxicated, but she may have been drugged. We really don't know at this point. Now, Flores, he stated to police that he walked Smart as far as his dormitory, then he allowed her to walk to her dorm, which was around 40 yards from that location. And that, my friend, that was the last sighting, the last known sighting of Kristin Smart. Here is an early timeline of what happened that day. On May the 25th, Kristin Smart's last seen around 2 a.m. And again, she's walking with students Paul Flores and Cheryl Anderson from a party near the Cal Poly campus. Anderson separates from Smart and Flores at an intersection of a place called Perimeter Road in Grant Avenue there. Then on May the 27th, which is Sunday of that weekend, a fellow student and friend, Jennifer Pipp, she was a friend of Kristin, she calls the Cal Poly campus police, and she reports that Smart is missing. Well, the police, they do not start a report at that time. They don't even do any investigating. They're just thinking, well, she probably went home. After all, it was Memorial Day weekend. Then on May the 28th, now this is on Monday of that same weekend, she's been missing since Friday night and early Saturday morning. Well, Jennifer then calls the San Luis Obispo Police Department to report Smart missing. A report is started, but Jennifer then again she's referred back to the Cal Poly University Campus Police Department. Now, on that day, the Cal Poly Campus Police, they do take a missing person report. Now, they also contact Stan and Denise, which should have been done when they were first alerted on Sunday, in my opinion. It's because now another 24 hours have passed. So this is the first time that Stan and Denise, her parents, know anything amiss about their daughter. Paul Flores, that person of interest, well, he's interviewed for the first time. He tells the campus officer that he and Smart separated right there at his hall and that he hasn't seen her since. Now, anyone who knows crime knows and realizes that in a missing person situation, the first 24 hours, they are critical. But official searches are not made now until May the 30th, 5 days later. And on that same day, the last person to see or claim to see her alive, Flores, well, he's interviewed now back at the station by campus investigators Ray Barrett and Mike Kennedy. Then on June the 6th, 12 days later, my friend, an official search was made of Kristin's dorm room by the Cal Poly Police Detective Mike Kennedy. Well, friend, it's very obvious. I don't think you have to be an expert to realize that law enforcement failed to execute search warrants in a timely and complete manner. You see, CSI teams, if any were used, well, it was actually happening much later into the investigation. And speaking of a failed law enforcement involvement, well, much later in the case, they even had a warrant to dig up a backyard. And that same backyard is where many are convinced that Kristin's body there, or parts thereof. So law enforcement had a warrant where they could dig up the yard, but they failed to do so. Now get this, because some reported that it was too costly. But I found out in research that this decision was made not by the chief deputy or undersheriff who was on the scene, but rather by a committee, because they didn't want any one person to be responsible, I guess. Boy, if they ever needed a real leader, it was then, don't you think? Anyhow, they decided not to, and that it might be too costly to do so. So again, you see another delay by law enforcement, even though at that time they had a warrant to dig up the yard. They don't have that opportunity now, it appears. So the first thing you may not know about Kristin Smart case is that in spite of delayed engagement by law enforcement, there is some good that did come from the frustration and grief that Kristin's parents have digested. And that's this. Smart's disappearance and slow response by the campus police, it resulted in something called the Kristin Smart Campus Security Act in California. This law took effect on January the 1st, 1999, and it does require that all public colleges and publicly funded educational institutions, they have their security services make agreements with local police departments about reporting cases involving or even possibly involving violence against students. That includes missing students. So now colleges in California, they must notify law enforcement of any violent crime or missing persons. This is the first thing you may not know about the disappearance of Kristin Smart. That is, that some good came out of all that frustration. Now, while our focus on this entire podcast is Kristin Smart, we do have to take a moment to update you regarding the young girl that had the same last name as Smart, who was rescued from those horrible attackers. Well, friend, she's back in the news again and again. It's not in such a good way. From CBS News comes this story. Child safety advocate and kidnapping survivor Elizabeth Smart, she says that she was sexually assaulted on an airplane while flying home to Utah last summer. Now, Smart, 32 years of age, who, if you recall, endured 9 months of daily torture and rape. That's when she was kidnapped at knife point as a teen in 2002. Well, she told CBS this morning that she was asleep on a Delta flight when she felt the man next to her rubbing her inner thigh. She went on to say, quote, seriously again, can this really be happening to me again? Do I have a big sign across my forehead that says victim? How is this happening to me again? Well, Smart does go on to say that she froze up when it happened. Then the man did not apologize, or he didn't say anything. "I'm Elizabeth Smart," she said. "I should know what to do, and at that moment I did not know what to do." She did file a complaint with Delta, and she doesn't blame the airline, and that is being investigated. She also contacted the FBI, but as you know, the Bureau does not and did not confirm or deny the existence of an investigation to NBC News. Now, you may not know that, but this incident is part of a larger trend. Sexual assaults on flights have increased 66% over a 3-year period, and that's according to the federal government. This would be a good time to remind everyone, if you or anyone you know have been sexually assaulted, well, you can get help, my friend, through the National Sexual Hotline, and that hotline number is 1-800-656-4673. That's 1-800-656-HOPE, or 1-800-656-4673. It is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, it'd also be a good time for me to say that if you do happen to know anything about the Kristin Smart case, please do go to authorities. Because, my friend, as it stands right now, the Kristin Smart case is still an unsolved one. Now, our special is the disappearance of Kristin Smart, who was last seen on May the 25th, 1996. First thing you may not know is that now there's a new law requiring campus and local police to work together and engage more fully and hopefully quicker. That law was passed as a result of the Kristin Smart case. The second thing that you may not know is that even though the main suspect, or as police say, persons of interest, Paul Flores, even though he has not been arrested, he was sued. He was sued from wrongful death by Kristin's parents. Now remember, this was during the era of when Goldman successfully sued O.J. Simpson for the wrongful death of his son. Now, there is a host of circumstantial evidence pointing to Paul Flores. See, he was the last person seen with her. And according to those who knew him best, his past actions with young women, well, they left little doubt in the minds of those who knew him that he would be exactly the kind of guy that would take advantage of Kristin. Remember, Kristin was reported to be at least in an impaired condition. Hey, he was even called creepy and scary, and probably a host of other names by those who knew him best. And others have come forth making claims of being sexually assaulted by Paul, much like the story of Elizabeth Smart, who was sexually abused on the Delta flight. Only the victim of Flores, well, they stated his actions was much more intrusive and even somewhat violent. These brave women, 7 at the last count, who are now coming forward, well, it may have been hurt a whole lot worse had they not stood up to Paul and his unwanted, uninvited sexual abuse. Hey, something else quite interesting about this so-called person of interest? The second thing you may not know about the case? Well, the Smart family filed a civil case in the wrongful death. Denise and Stan Smart, they filed a $40 million wrongful death lawsuit against Paul. Now, the lawsuit, which remains ongoing, alleges that Flores was murdered on Cal Poly campus. Now, the Smarts later, they added Cal Poly as a defendant, alleging that campus officials failed to keep their daughter safe. A San Luis Obispo Superior Court judge, well, initially dismissed the university from the complaint, but gave the Smarts a second chance to prove their case. Now, get this, during the depositions in this civil suit, well, the family learned that a tenant of the property, well, it was a bombshell, friend. You see, the tenant who rented the Ariel Grand East Branch Street, that's the person of interest mom's house, well, that person, the tenant, had given to the police a turquoise earring that she found in the driveway while she was washing her car. The earring, which according to the tenant had a smear on it and maybe a partial fingerprint allegedly, well, it was placed in an evidence bag and it was marked as a potential exhibit. The tenant even said that the officer took a picture of it. Now, Denise, Kristin's mom, well, Kristin's mom stated that her daughter had one just like it, and she believes she wore it on the night that she was missing. She believes it because the earrings were not found in her real property. No, they weren't. So, the Smarts decided that they would find out about this. and they repeatedly asked the sheriff's department to let them see the earring, but they were stonewalled in each request. Frustrated, they decided to pay an unscheduled visit to the sheriff's department. And as they got there, they told the sheriff's department, now get this, the sheriff's department, when they finally got there and said, why are you stonewalling us? Why don't we have this evidence? Can we see the earring? Well, they were told by the sheriff's departments, are you sitting down? Hope you are. They said that they had lost or misplaced the earring. Now, I will say that the sheriff's department said, for whatever reason, they didn't consider the evidence crucial. Even so, one has to ask why that evidence is lost and what happened to it, and why aren't they investigating how they could lose it? Well, keep in mind, now remember the FBI, well, and other law enforcement agencies I know about, they've obtained convictions on the discovery of a microscopic hair or even a fiber. Things like an earring, well, that can be enough evidence to take it to trial. Let me ask you, are you as frustrated about this as I am? Well, just imagine what our family went through. Did the earring have blood, fingerprint on it? Well, we're never going to know because that sheriff's department did not even exercise enough professional care to safeguard what I consider a critical piece of evidence. So this hard evidence has now become circumstantial evidence. But it would not have been even made public, perhaps, if not for the second thing that you may not know. A civil lawsuit was filed by her parents. Now remember, this did occur in 1996 on a college campus, so how safe really is our college campuses? Well, when it comes to sexual assault, according to recent stats, it's a growing problem. Reports, especially in light of some of the more prominent perps, these sports doctors and trainers, well, the stats are now off the chart with sexual assaults. And please remember, if you know someone who's been sexually assaulted or you yourself have been and need help, well, please call again that sexual hotline for assault victims, 1-800-656-4673, 1-800-656-HOPE, 1-800-656-4673. Now, there's a third thing that you may not know about the disappearance of Kristin Smart, and that is that circumstantial evidence has been enough to convict in the past in certain cases. Well, there's even been cases that have been successfully prosecuted even without a body. You see, an instructor once explained to me and others in the Tennessee Law Enforcement Academy in Donaldson, Tennessee, well, they explained that circumstantial evidence can be explained this way. Hey, say you're going to bed on a cold winter night. Snow is forecast to occur. However, you're not going to stay up to see if it snows or not. But the next day you get up and you see the ground covered with 4 or more inches of snow on the ground. Now let me ask you, did you see it snow? No. You did not, quote-unquote, witness the snow itself. But circumstances, forecast of snow in the evening, snow on the ground in the morning. It communicates you that it did indeed snow. Snow did indeed occur. So pay attention to circumstances. They can lead you to real truth. And a fourth thing that you may not know about this case, how really overwhelming the circumstantial evidence is. First, there's prior bad behavior on behalf of the main, quote, power or person of interest, Paul Torres. You see, in December 1995, well, the Cal Poly student, Paul Flores, well, he's apprehended. Wasn't arrested, but he was apprehended by the San Luis Obispo police. You see, he's suspected of being a peeping Tom or attempting to break in of a co-ed's off-campus apartment. He climbed up on a balcony. Police, they advised him to leave. He appeared to be intoxicated. Sadly, it appears that the San Luis Obispo police, well, they did not even notify Cal Poly Police Department of this incident. And on March 27, 1996, there was a crime report that was filed by the San Luis Police Department. It concerned harassing phone calls to an off-campus apartment where 3 co-eds resided. They reported to police they'd been receiving phone calls for 6 weeks. Times there were as many as 8 calls in a row. The caller says nothing, then hangs up after the co-ed says hello. Well, the victims, they do suspect that it is Paul Flores making the calls. And remember, he was the one who was apprehended climbing up their balcony in December. Then remember now, folks, this guy was the last person to be seen with Kristin. And even his story about that changed several times. First, he said he did not walk her to his dorm, but watched her walk to her dorm. Then to his roommate who had been away for the weekend. Well, the roommate was told with Flores that he had walked Kristin home, then came back to the dorm. Well, the roommate, according to police reports, said he even joked with Flores about the case and asked Flores what he did with Kristin. Well, Flores said that his roommate said words to this effect, quote, "She's at home with my parents." By the way, police close to the case, they say it's probably a truthful statement that Kristin's body was indeed home with his parents. You see, many believe that Kristin Smart is buried under a concrete slab in the back home, that home that they did not dig up. Remember that I told you about earlier? Belonging to the Flores family on East Branch Street, Rio Grande, California. Then it came to DA investigators that students who knew Paul, now get this, they noticed a black eye on Paul after the day of Kristin's disappearance. You see, because Paul frequently wore shorts, one student even noticed that his knees were all scraped up too, and his arms. Now, Paul changed his story multiple times regarding how he received his injuries. Throughout the interviews with Paul, person of interest, they found that the person of interest, was lying to them. Investigators did. They went on to ask him, how do we know now that you haven't lied to us? That's what a detective asked. He responded by saying, he didn't feel that his injuries, black eye and scratches, were that important. And then he told investigators that his black eye was caused by an elbow that he received during a basketball game. Then investigators interviewed a friend who said Paul had the black eye on Sunday before the basketball game. You see, people believe Paul may have been telling a partial truth, that he could have received his black eye from an elbow. That is, Kristin's elbow, as she fought back against an unwanted sexual assault. Finally, he reported what I believe the most disturbing of all. He said this, quote, "I don't know how I got it. I just woke up with it." No wonder after he got legal representation, he was told to shut up. And during the depositions that was given, he pled the fifth, and he remained silent. Something else very interesting. You see, Paul may have attempted, according to others, to call the one person he knew he could trust. That's his father, Reuben Flores. You see, Reuben lived on White Court in Rio Grande. That was about 15 miles from the Cal Poly campus. You see, one theory says that Paul placed a call from his dorm room in the early mornings of May 25, 1996, and may have received instructions to get off the campus to use a payphone. That theory is supported by an off-the-cuff statement purportedly made by Reuben's wife, Susan Flores. You see, she told her co-worker the same morning. Now, remember this, she didn't know anything about what had happened the night before, but she said she told a co-worker said that she told her that something must have happened last night, because right after her husband received a phone call in the middle of the night, he left the house like a bat out of hell. And another theory in removing the body is that Paul could have done it in a pickup truck, because he did have a pickup truck. That could have been used to get rid of the body. If Kristin died at Cal Poly dorm room, as many suspect, someone could have used a pickup truck like the one owned by Paul to move her body to a different location. But once again, law enforcement, they were slow in getting that vital information and moving on it. You see, many months passed before investigators finally asked to see Paul's pickup truck. And as it would go, guess what? Paul said his pickup truck was stolen. And as far as anyone knows, he never reported it to law enforcement that his truck had been stolen. Sure. You see what I mean about circumstantial evidence? You see, if law enforcement thought Paul's pickup truck was used to transport a dead body, they would have immediately impounded the truck, inspected it with cadaver dogs right after Paul became a person of interest. But incredibly, it took almost a year to even ask to see his vehicle. Some of this is speculation, but within it is plenty of circumstantial evidence. I've seen people convicted with a whole lot more, my friend. And to some, and to me, the most critical circumstantial evidence is the work of the K-9 department. You see, they seem to be the only law enforcement team that's really on the spot, if you know what I mean. As a former retired law enforcement investigator, I have a great deal of respect for the work of K-9s and police work cadaver dogs add to the circumstantial evidence. I consider it much more harder evidence. These dogs, get this, alerted. 4 different dogs. 4 different dogs alerted without influence in Paul's dorm, in his room. They alerted on his stripped mattress. And after the cadaver dogs alerted at the 3 different areas in Paul's room, well, authorities, they had a fairly high confidence that either a dead body was in room number 128, Paul's room, or someone who had access to that room had touched the dead body and then touched the bed, the waste paper basket, and the telephone. Under Sheriff Steve Bolts made the direct statement that at one time there was a dead body in that room. And a search much later, also, the dogs alerted on his mom's property, in the same area where the tenants said there was an old-type garbage can that they were told to leave alone, only to be picked up quickly and removed to the property by the owners. And in an earlier interview where he said he had to leave and he had all he could take, well, just days after the incident, he said he had to go help his mom with cleaning up some concrete at her house. Why authorities did not move with a search warrant then, well, friend, that's beyond me. You see, to me, the circumstantial evidence is overwhelming, despite the failure of law enforcement in the case. Paul is, without a doubt in my mind, responsible for the death of Kristin Smart and knows where or who put away the body. Last but not least, the fifth thing you need to know is that the case has new legs. Yes, it has new legs. Again, probably mainly thanks to the recent podcast in the backyard, in your own backyard, that now boast, our friend can now boast of over 2 million downloads. And because of that, there is new action on behalf of law enforcement. Because of just this past Wednesday, authorities investigating Miss Smart's appearance, well, they executed search warrants at 4 locations in California and Washington State. They recovered items of interest. That's what a spokesman for the San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's Office said. One of the locations, well, it was San Pedro, California, home of Paul Flores, who now is 43 years of age. That's according to KCAL-TV in Los Angeles. Remember, Mr. Flores, he was the last person to see Miss Smart after she left the party at 2 a.m. on May the 25th, 1996. Flores has denied any involvement in the disappearance, said that he walked her only as far as his dorm, where they parted ways. Now, Mr. Flores, who's never been charged in the case, well, he's long been a person of interest. And the spokesperson, they described him Wednesday as the only person of interest. And KCAL-TV reported that a man believed to be Mr. Flores, he was detained in a Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department squad vehicle for 2 hours Wednesday morning outside his home in San Pedro. The man was handcuffed, questioned, then released by deputies after signing paperwork. That's what KCAL-TV reported. And the Tribune there, the San Luis Tribune, they reported that sheriff's deputies and FBI agents were also seen Wednesday outside the home in Rio Grande, California. That, of course, of Mr. Flores' mother, Susan Flores. Caution tape, it was posted outside of her home. And about 15 spectators gathered across the street to watch investigators work, and some of them were shouting, "Dig her up, dig her up." That's what the Tribune reported. Also, since there's been new leadership in the sheriff's office, there's been a greater effort, it seems like, to solve the case. Well, while it's too early to tell, let's hope that this new activity, and it did include also the new activity, they were able to secure two trucks that might have been used, and other items was brought in that might lead to an arrest. However, I got to tell you folks, I'm not holding my breath. Let's just pray that it does happen. Now, in our podcast, we all like to share lessons we can learn. Two come to mind quickly, of many lessons, but two quickly. Number one, do not leave people alone, particularly those who are under the influence. Bad things can happen. And number two, do not assume in investigating. Do not assume anything. You see, campus police assumed she was home for the weekend, assumed she may have been off camping, and precious time and evidence was wasted, gone, in this tragic mistake of investigators just assuming. Well, this is Charlie Crimebuster we'll try to keep you updated on this case. It intrigues me. I hope it does you too. If you need to contact us on our website, charliecrimebuster.com, charliecrimebuster.com. We'd love to hear from you. Tell others about us and get the word out there. Help us keep others safe. This is Charlie Crimebuster reminding you, and to remind others, be alert, be aware of your surroundings at all times, for the life you save, it may be your very own.